and they've got biscuits as well. There's biscuits.
Yeah.
I'll do anything for a biscuit. No, Tony, not literally anything.
I just wanted to find out.
Not literally anything, Tony.
It was a metaphor.
It was a metaphor. Yeah.
Coffee, what the tea? Coffee. These three. Any of them.
I'm tea.
So you can choose your malt and everything. These two are tea on my right.
This is tea.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So
I have coffee and sugar. Yeah,
coffee, you can take the sugar.
thanks.
Do you want milk, Steve?
Is that coffee?
No, that's tea.
And that?
That's coffee.
Okay.
Do you want milk?
Yes, I do have a bit, yeah.
God, look at the biscuits. Look at the biscuits.
Okay, thanks.
Right, you're going to tell me when to stop.
Yeah, sure.
Stop. Community camp for Palestine.
Community camp.
For Palestine. That's coffee, that's tea.
Oh, tea, yeah.
Are you going to get the best biscuits? I'm going to do the nice thing.
Oh,
Pass
yeah.
them round, Tony. Would you like a biscuit?
Yeah, yes, I will. Thank you.
Tell me when to stop.
I relied on you to do nice things. So I could do the nuts.
Crispin,
Thank you
do
very
you want
much.
a biscuit?
I can't really have one. I'll be all over the place if I want
Will you?
Yeah, I have crumbs all over me.
Thanks.
Is it on?
Tony, would you like another biscuit?
That's very kind of you. Yes, I would. I don't be.
Are we on
believe
then?
in being polite to
Right.
say
Okay, so look, I'm just going to put my phone away because I don't really need that. So, welcome everyone to the camp outside the US Embassy, the community camp for Palestine. There's a big crowd here, as you can see. If you're watching on the live stream, we've got a lot of people here who've come to hear a discussion about weaponising anti-Semitism. And as you can see, it's not raining, but it's not the warmest. There's tea. People are eating biscuits, and this is the kind of thing they do at the camp. A lot of biscuits and a lot of tea, and it's great. And our panellists are all here. We've got Stephen Kapos, Jackie Walker, Asa Winstanley, and Tony Greenstein. He's going to have a fag. He's going to have a fag. You can smoke it as well out here, can't you? The thing about this is weaponising anti-Semitism. I mean, the whole idea of it was something I couldn't imagine. I don't know, 10 years ago, I just would never have dreamed that anyone could do such a thing as weaponising anti-Semitism. Some people still think that there isn't such a thing as weaponising anti-Semitism too. But I've come to think that there is. And I'd like to ask to speak about this first, Stephen Kapos, who, as we know, is a Holocaust survivor and has seen what anti-Semitism is all about in its worst form. And I'd just like to ask you, what do you think about this idea of weaponising anti-Semitism? Is it something that you've heard of recently, or is it something that's been going on before? What's your view on this?
Well, as a past member of the Labour Party, I met the anti-Semitism weaponry a few years ago already.
Turn it near a bit. Is it
Yeah.
on?
Is it on?
Is it on? Hold on.
Sorry, I was saying that as a past member of the Labour Party, I came across using anti-Semitism as the most effective, perhaps the only effective weapon against the left, and particularly against Jeremy Corbyn, as we know. And I think it is heavily dependent on the background of the Holocaust, which the right the Zionists and the Israeli government kind of hijacked for their purposes. And I have a limited number of, but very vivid memories of the Holocaust myself, because I had to wear the yellow star. I've seen the fear in the adults around me, although I was too young to be too fearful myself. I was in hiding with false names and false papers, and under the protection of churches, particularly the Reformed Church of Hungary and the so-called Evangelist, and the Swiss Red Cross. But overlaid with all that and the dangers, on top of that, where we have been located in Budapest, the front line of the fight between the Germans and the Russians has kind of moved through us pretty much. And so I have particular sympathy and resonance with what has been going on in Gaza, because I've seen the utter devastation of that kind of fighting, with the difference that that was the total destruction around us, just in that locality, which was close to the royal castle where the last stand was made by the Germans with some loyal Hungarian troops, was the byproduct of fighting, whereas the destruction in Gaza is a deliberate act without any fighting of significance. So to a degree more evil, if you like. Anyway, so that's a background. I've been through it and hiding and in fear and various. We also experienced for the period of that fighting being cut off, all services. Water was supplied by collecting snow from the street and melting it, etc. So we went through it. But jumping back to closer today, my next sort of experience of dealing with the anti-Semitism issues was within the Labour Party, when it started up to claim that there was a great extent of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. And we looked around and we didn't see that that was in any way correct. I was member of the Momentum group then, and one evening we had a meeting where we were proposing a motion for the next General Council meeting, which is a monthly large Labour Party gathering in the constituency, Holborn and St Pancras constituency, where we were, as Momentum, proposing a motion that we disagree with this claim that there is any degree of serious anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, any greater than anywhere else in the country, and considerably less than in the Tory party, for sure. My colleagues were wording a good motion, and then they looked around and said, well, who should present it? You are a Holocaust survivor, best come from you. So I had to, for the first time, speak in public, presenting our motion. What I didn't realize, I had to follow the leader of the council, who spoke the opposite way, Georgia Gould, who is now, she was a Blairite daughter of Philip Gould, if anybody knows about him, and so also I had to follow Keir Starmer, who was just coming back. He was just coming back from a shadow cabinet meeting where he proudly said that after much discussion we have come to a unified view that we must root out this evil anti-Semitism from the party. And then I had to follow to say, no, we don't see any here, which wasn't very easy. But I said, well, sorry, I had to speak from my own experience, and I haven't, and as a Holocaust survivor and a Jewish Holocaust survivor, I would be particularly sensitized towards any kind of anti-Semitism. I never experienced any in our party, nor have I seen anybody else experience it. So I said, therefore I conclude there isn't any in here. And there was a debate, and the right-wing opposition tried to water down our resolution by all kinds of means. Several were advanced, and it was up to me as a presenter to accept or reject these amendments, and I rejected them all. Then it came to voting, and we won the vote. And this was the last time, I think, that a left-wing motion was won through in our constituency, which has a good contingent of Zionists in it, organized around Jewish labor movement. After we won the motion, by that time I knew Keir Starmer fairly reasonably, because not only was he the MP for our constituency, but he was also in my branch of it. So sometimes earlier on we went door knocking a couple of times together, and I went up to him and said, "Well, I'm sorry, I have to be honest to my experience. You know, I'm sorry if it opposed you." And he said, "Yes, but you divided the party." And that coming from him is really interesting, and stormed away. So that was my first brush with the weaponization of anti-Semitism, and a fairly positive one. The next time was a significant time when Tony here asked me to address the SLN meeting, Holocaust Memorial Day. And he asked me, and I said, yes, of course I would speak. And then it was trailed, I think, and it was picked up by the constituency Labour Party bureaucrats, and said, he was going to speak at a meeting of a proscribed organization, and wrote me a letter immediately, said, if you go ahead, be on notice that you would be subject to disciplinary action, which meant in my language, thrown out, because nobody's ever got through a Labour Party disciplinary investigation that I know. And I resigned with a fairly strong letter in which I say that it's a shame, and future generations and historians will note that it was the Labour Party that imported McCarthyism into this country, in the political life of this country. I think I probably oversaid my time.
No, thank you. Oh, mine's gone off there. Is mine working? Is it? There you go. Thank you very much for that, Stephen. It's very interesting about Keir Starmer as well, and this origin of the Labour Party, sort of where this weaponising anti-Semitism comes from. Yeah. I mean, Jackie Walker has obviously had an experience of this as well, and was in Momentum. How big a part of it is the Labour Party? That Labour Party weaponising of it, is that something that's grown since then, or was it something you were aware of in any other area? This weaponising anti-Semitism. Did you see it anywhere before the Labour Party?
I mean, I'm going to match what Stephen said, which is, you know, I mean, because I'm also Jewish. I'm black, but I'm also Jewish, and I'd never come across any anti-Semitism. Now, if you'd asked me about anti-black racism, I could tell you a lot of stories about that. If you want to know about anti-Muslim racism in the Labour Party, I can tell you about that. I can tell you a bit about misogyny, and I can tell you all sorts of things. But the one thing you didn't find in the Labour Party, I found, was anti-Semitism. So when this started, and I mean, I know me and Tony, I mean, Tony always says that he was the first Jewish person. And I always say I am. I think we both got there at about the same time. We're joint first in terms of being suspended from the Labour Party, I think. And I think when we had it, I mean, you were just in a state of shock. It was total, utter shock. It would be like, where did this come from? It was inexplicable. Now, of course, now we know, and we partly know it because people like Asa have done a lot of research on this, that there were people who had been planning this for some time. This didn't just come from fresh air. It certainly didn't come from Keir Starmer. I don't know if he's ever had a novel idea in his life, so it certainly didn't come from him. And it all came out, didn't it? It was like it suddenly came, and if you look back now, we would recognise it, the familiarity with what the accusations were, about who said it, about what happened. And of course what then happened, and it happened extremely swiftly, is that the whole media joined in. You'd almost think it was orchestrated, wouldn't you? You'd be tempted to think that the journalists were kind of prompted to put this on the top of their pages. I'd never noticed journalists interested in racism really very much in the political parties in the UK, but they were fascinated by this. And of course, I think with me, they got a double whammy as well. You know, they got somebody who was black and Jewish, so that the level of hatred was absolutely, it was intense. And I still find it quite difficult to remember how that felt, because it was traumatizing. It was totally traumatizing. But what we've got to be clear about is that it was in total preparation to what we're seeing now. It was a preparation for the protection of Zionism and the protection of the inevitability, and they knew it was going to happen, that Zionism was going to use violence to get what it wants. And that's what all of this preparation was about. And they've almost got to the end of it now, haven't they? They've almost got to the point where they have enabled such cynicism around these accusations that people don't really take it seriously anymore. But I think it's important to remember that when it first happened, it was extremely serious. It was extremely damaging. And for me, it remains damaging, because I will never publish any work ever again. I was a published writer. That will never happen again. Nobody will ever offer me a contract. And that's, that seems to be a minor thing, because compared to what people have gone through. But it did destroy people's lives. It destroyed their sense of well-being. And it was all a preparation for destroying the people of Palestine.
Thank you, Jackie. Asa, obviously you've written the book Weaponising Antisemitism, and in the book, you go through the Labour Party history, and there you go. There's the book. You go through the Labour Party history. What is that? Jackie said this is to prepare for where we are now. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I agree with that. To kind of answer the same question that you put to the others, I probably first came across weaponizing anti-Semitism as an issue when I returned from Palestine. So I'm a journalist, and before I was a journalist, I was an activist. I was in a group called the International Solidarity Movement, and I spent a couple of years living in Palestine in the West Bank, working, in solidarity with Palestinians. And I ended up doing media work for them and whatnot. And one of the things that Palestinians always told us was, go back to your countries, because ISM people came from all over the world, mostly North America and Europe, but also a lot of the Scandinavian countries and whatnot. And Palestinians always said to us, go back to your countries and tell our stories, and try to change your countries, because it starts in your countries. And there's a very high degree of awareness amongst Palestinians, especially as someone who is a British citizen, that the Zionism got its start in lots of ways as a project of British imperialism. So there's a very high degree of awareness amongst Palestinians that the problems here were caused by Balfour and the British Empire and whatnot. And so, a lot of us wanted to do that and continue our activism or work here in this country. And so I spent a couple of years living in Palestine. And when I came back to London, 2008 to 2009, I started to, I was getting my start in journalism. For people who don't know, I write for the Electronic Intifada. It's a website that publishes about Palestine, focused on Palestine as a global issue. I'm mainly a writer, but we have a weekly live stream as well on tomorrow on YouTube and other streaming platforms. I was trying to write about Palestinian stories and get it into the media, and getting my start in independent journalism, alternative journalism, you could call it, I guess, reader-supported journalism. And every time you tried, so I would go to a lot of events, like activist events, Palestine Solidarity events, meetings about Palestine, and every time you try and do that, there would be a small cohort of Zionist fanatics, basically, who would try and sabotage them, the usual suspects kind of people, and it would always be, you'd always be accused of anti-Semitism, basically. So that's I guess how I came across it. I remember a meeting around about, it was probably 2009, with Omar Barghouti, and it was completely, that I went to at SOAS, and it was covered by the BBC, it wasn't ignored, but it was completely misrepresented. It was completely twisted on its head and made out to be anti-Jewish, when actually all it was talking about was trying to boycott Israel. And so, anyone who's been around the Palestinian Solidarity movement will be familiar with these kinds of accusations. And so I suppose when the whole Jeremy Corbyn movement started in 2015, because of my experience in that movement and how the issue's been weaponized since forever. I mean, in the book I trace it back to Abba Eban, one of the former Israeli diplomats, who made a speech about it, saying that anti-Zionism was the new anti-Semitism, I believe in the 1970s. I'd have to check my own book, I forget now. But it's false allegations of anti-Semitism are as old as Zionism in some ways, because the original target of the weaponized anti-Semitism is the Palestinians themselves, because and you see it now, like the whole premise and pretext of Israeli propaganda is still that, well, Palestinians don't really care about their land. They only want to get it. They only want to get at us as if because we're Jews. They only want us to get us out because we're Jews. That's the idea that Israeli propaganda still put forward now. They sort of say, well, it's just anti-Semitism. It's just anti-Jewish. And if you think about it for 5 minutes, it's completely ludicrous because the premise is that if the Palestinians hadn't been kicked out of their land by a movement, a Jewish movement, a movement that presents itself as a Jewish movement and calls itself the Jewish state, if they'd been kicked out by people who were calling themselves Buddhists or Hindus or Zoroastrians, they would have said, okay, it's fine, you're not Jewish, we don't hate you. You can kick us off our land, it's completely fine. So when you put it in those terms, it's completely ludicrous.
No, I mean that's certainly true. I mean the idea that that it's the land grab, it has to have some other element to keep it going. Do you think that's important, Tony? That that this grabbing of land in Palestine, it has to have something else behind it in order to give it some kind of distraction from what they're doing. Is that what's going on here?
It's not so much a distraction. Every settler colonial enterprise, if every colonial enterprise needs a moral justification. I mean, when the British Empire was in being, then it was the white man's burden. When we went to India, it was to get rid of sati. I mean, imperialists don't conquer countries and say openly, we're doing it to exploit them as much as possible. They always find a rationale in terms of the white man's civilizing mission or what have you. But if I can come back really to just say a few things. Despite Jackie's claim to the crown, I have to say that I was the first Jewish person to be expelled. February 2018, and that was definitely before you. And I was suspended in March 2019, and I'm not sure whether that was before you or not. But regardless, when I was expelled, and it was announced to the media, the first person on Twitter, first MP, to comment was Keir Starmer with one word, because he's a man of very few words and even fewer ideas. And he said, good. And that was it. So that was my experience of the so-called anti-Semitism campaign in the Labour Party. But I want to put it in the context, and I did cover it quickly in my book, that in 1989, I wrote in an obscure anti-Zionist Jewish magazine, Return, about an article saying that anti-Semitism was the false anti-racism of the right. And I used as the examples what was happening with the Sandinistas in Latin America, and then it happened with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, that they were accused by Zionists in the United States of anti-Semitism because their Jewish populations had largely left. Not because they were Jews, but because they were better off than most Nicaraguans, and therefore the revolutionaries took an interest in their property like all bourgeois. But that was termed anti-Semitism. So the use of anti-Semitism as a weapon of imperialism does long predate what happened in the Labour Party. But of course, why anti-Semitism? Well, it's a naked use of people's abhorrence of the racism that led to the murder of millions of Jews. And they play on that. And if they didn't think that people would, if you like, suffer from the idea that you could possibly be an anti-Semite, they wouldn't use it. It's because it has that emotional impact on people that they do. But it is a cynical exploitation of the memory of the Holocaust victims. And you see that in Israel, where the reparations intended for the thousands of Holocaust survivors there are spent on Zionist projects. I mean, the Holocaust survivors themselves live in abject poverty, despite the fact that Israel has, I think last year, spent the highest amount per capita on weapons and arms. So Zionism is extremely cynical. But I mean, I wrote a book, Zionism During the Holocaust, and what I did was I showed that up to 1939, Zionism was in a minority in the Jewish communities everywhere in the world. In a sense, it was Hitler who built the Jewish state, the Israeli state. And when Zionism first came on the scene, most Jews saw it as a form of Jewish anti-Semitism. That's the irony, because the anti-Semites were saying that they didn't want the Jews in their midst, wanted to be rid of them. And the Zionists were saying, yes, we're only happy to leave. So, I mean, there was a symmetry. I mean, Zionism and anti-Semitism were two twins of a kind, in a sense. So, I mean, that is a history. So that is the irony of them accusing others of anti-Semitism, when in fact Zionism itself embodies the very ideas of anti-Semitism. The Jew cannot live with non-Jews. I mean, that's the essence of it, that you have to live in a society of your own. And that's where it comes from. So we see today the complete cynical use of it. I mean, Donald Trump is defunding universities because he's so concerned about anti-Semitism against Jewish students. This is a man whose trademark is bigotry and racism. So how is it that Trump is so concerned about anti-Semitism when every other form of racism he is a past master at? I mean, it's obviously hypocritical, but that's our ruling class for you.
Can I just sort of follow on a bit with that? Is you know, this sort of misuse of anti-Semitism. I mean, what's the danger of that? I mean, it's weaponising it. What do you see as the danger of that?
Well, one danger is, of course, the boy cries wolf syndrome, that if you cry anti-Semitism repeatedly, people actually don't recognise what the real thing is. Because, I mean, I actually get it. I mean, when I've called out certain people, like Gilad Atzmon, for example, as a genuine anti-Semite who says he supports the Palestinians, people turn around and say, well, we've heard that before, we don't believe you. Precisely because it's used so much when it's obviously not true. But Zionism doesn't really care. I mean, they held a conference fighting anti-Semitism in Jerusalem a couple of weeks ago. And who did they invite? All the world's anti-Semites. And I mean, there is an argument that if you're going to hold a conference on anti-Semitism, who best understands it but the anti-Semites? But that's exactly what happened. Representatives from every far-right party in Europe and beyond came to the conference. It was so embarrassing that even Zionist organisations like the Anti-Defamation League and even our chief Rabbi Mervis pulled out, because it was so embarrassing to be sitting alongside neo-Nazis saying you were fighting anti-Semitism. But that is the corner that Zionism has got itself into today.
Asa, I mean, with your book, I mean, the thing that I've found really painful with this weaponising anti-Semitism is being accused of being anti-Semitic when I'm not. I mean, just that's it, and being accused of it is so painful to be told that, and it takes a lot of time. I mean, you said that when you came back from Palestine, you encountered this at some meetings. I'm just wondering, how did you, when did you realise that it was? When did you realise that it was weaponised anti-Semitism? When did you feel comfortable? When did you feel? Oh, give it a break. When did you feel comfortable? There we go. When did you sort of feel that, oh, I know what's going on here, it isn't real, I'm not anti-Semitic? Because if you're not Jewish, it's not easy to be told by someone who's Jewish that you're anti-Semitic. I mean, how did you kind of come to see it for what it was?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure of the answer. I mean, I think there's two aspects of it. I think because when you've seen, I mean, it wasn't Gaza. I know it went to Gaza. It was the West Bank, but still, you know, seeing the reality, it's still very, very violent, the occupation in the West Bank, and just seeing the daily reality of the Palestinians, and then, you know, compared to even what they're alleging, which isn't even true, that it just seemed ridiculous to me straight away. But also the fact, because ultimately you're talking about. So that's one thing. Ultimately, you're talking about someone's feelings because they said they allegedly said something that wasn't very nice. So there's that. Just the general ridiculousness of it, but also I suppose that when I was in the anti-war movement and that I met lots of anti-Zionist Jews or non-Zionist Jews. I remember Charlie Pottins. I used to go to the same Stop the War, the late Charlie Pottins.
I remember him well.
I used to go to the same Stop the War branch as him, and he would write about it, and then people like Tony would write about it, about the tradition of the tradition within Judaism, the anti-Zionist tradition within Judaism. So and then I met more Jewish people in the Palestinian Solidarity movement than anywhere else, another aspect of my life. So I always saw it as ridiculous myself. But on the issue of what you're talking about, how how what you said, you found it impactful, and that to be accused of anti-Semitism in reporting on this topic for a decade now. I mean, I don't report on it so much now because I've literally written the book on it, but it still comes up all the time. That on reporting on this for so long, that came up time and time again for so many people. People on the left did find it quite devastating to be falsely accused of racism when they are actually the anti-racists. It was said over and over again, by people like Jackie, we were being accused by racists of falsely of being racist. It was a complete inversion of reality. And people did, as Jackie said earlier, people did find it quite devastating. And especially when you're talking about the broad left within that was kind of either entering or re-entering, in many cases, the Labour Party. That people were, of course, broadly supportive of Palestinian rights, equality, and against Israeli occupation and whatnot, but it wasn't necessarily their main topic. So they weren't necessarily familiar with the dirty tactics of the pro-Israel lobby and the Israeli government, and how they just completely, not just exaggerate, but just completely invent things. They weren't prepared for that. Just time and time again, I just came in front of so many invented cases, and people were quite devastated in some cases. Like Jackie's talked about a small part of it there, but there was lots of cases that I couldn't even report on in my book because people were just too traumatized, too afraid to speak out. Some people, I have to say, were too cowardly to speak out. But there was people who I came across one case that I couldn't report on of somebody who descended into alcoholism because of the issue. There was one allegation that one person the issue had contributed to their suicide, allegedly. So it was very, very devastating for a lot of people. But I think now that unfortunately a lot of people have got a kind of trial by fire on that, and it does mean now that it's for the pro-Israel lobby, it's a losing strategy, because it means that it's always harder and harder for them to use it again and to be believed in the future. But it doesn't stop them. They keep doing it because they've got nothing else.
Jackie, I'm just thinking about, Asa was sort of talking about it a bit there. The Jewish comrades have given people like Asa and me a steer on what's actually going on, and how important has that been for for us to, as a movement, to be able to face all these this weaponized anti-Semitism, all these smears?
I mean, I think it's crucial. I think it's quite astonishing how what's happened has actually also been about silencing a significant part of the Jewish voice. It's extraordinary. And it's not even just silencing them. What they do is what you call de-Jewifying people. So I don't know if anybody remembers Trump saying about that guy, well, he used to be Jewish, but now he's Palestinian, if you remember, because he had said something which was, not within a kind of Zionist mentality. And I mean, in a way, that's a good thing, because for somebody like me, I think to myself, well, what that says to people is that all of these identities of concepts of being black or being Asian or being Jewish or whatever, they're movable. In fact, they're about political statements about where we are, because as we all know, these divisions are sort of nonsense. There are no real races. So calling somebody or describing somebody within a certain category is actually telling you about their power status within a society. So in a way, it's a good thing, but it's astonishing, isn't it, that what they do at the one time is both say, like, Jews are so important. They're so important. We can't upset them. Like, the worst thing that could happen to you at a meeting, I remember them, is, we'd be talking about awful things. We'd be talking about poverty. We'd be talking about the awfulness of what was going on in Israel. And then somebody would say, I'm feeling upset about this.
Somebody rolled their eyes at me.
Oh, somebody rolled their, I remember that one. Somebody rolled their eyes at me and I'm really feeling devastated and terrified. And you'd go, for fuck's sake, what's the matter with you? And nobody would do that. And why wouldn't they do that? Because this was all about McCarthyism. It's exactly the same. It's a regurgitation of that McCarthyism. And McCarthyism really is just another strategy within all those other repressive strategies. So in Nazi Germany, it was used in its own way as well. You couldn't talk outside of the parameters of what the Nazis want. Just as in the same way, in Israel, you have certain Jews who have been speaking out against what has been happening, have been, beaten up, have lost their jobs, have lost their tenures. So what we have is this being used and weaponized for the political purpose of destroying the left. Now, we all know that. What really concerns me is I still look around the left, and I'm talking very broadly here, and seeing some people still being divided by this nonsense, by this utter nonsense. I don't want to talk, in a way, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I am so bored. And I mean, that's dangerous. That's the danger in itself. I am so bored with talking about anti-Semitism. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I want to talk about what's happening in Gaza. I want to talk about what's happening in America. I want to talk about the fact that we're having people in America and the UK being taken from our streets and put into prison. That's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about poverty. I want to talk about injustice. I want to talk about actual oppression. And the point is, in the UK and in America today, the level of anti-Semitism is totally, absolutely negligible. It's negligible. Structurally, it doesn't exist. Structurally, it doesn't exist. And nobody can tell me, I'm sorry, that what most Jews in America or the UK experience is actually arrant, violent racism. It's prejudice. It's bigotry. It can be all of those things. I remember I went to speak at UCL, and there was this line of young Jewish students. They were from the student group. And they were all, you could tell, they were all from public schools. And I was talking about an essay that I had done, and which had been included in some work with Chomsky. Anyway, I was talking about that, and this guy put his hand up, and he said to me, you know the trouble with you and people like you, and he was talking about me being black, actually. He said, you don't really understand about racism. I mean, takes your breath away. The arrogance of these people. You know, and we need to start calling this out more often. It is total, utter nonsense. In the UK, Jews have never been so protected and so comfortable and so safe. That's the truth of it. And so I want to get to the point where we're not having to have meetings like this, where we're not having to talk about it, when Jews are not having to talk about it. But I just have to say one last thing. Don't you just love what's happened with the border deputies? Don't you just love it? You know, the 30-something people in the border deputies who dare to criticise Israel, yeah? And what happens to them? They're going to be disciplined. Oh, yummy.
Now, Stephen, I'd just like to ask you, because you go on all the protests with the Holocaust survivors, and you make a point of showing how safe you are and how there's no hostility from the people who are supporting Palestine and calling out the genocide. And you've kind of seen how anti-Semitism has been misapplied there. I mean, that Gideon Fulter guy, you were there at the time when he was pretending that he couldn't cross the road and he was getting the police and stuff like that.
That's
I mean, does it not appall you? Does it sicken you that people are behaving like that when you consider what you've actually been through?
Sorry.
You can have a little musical background.
I'm sorry about this.
Oh,
God, thank you.
Do you want to start again? No, I'm just thinking about that Gideon Fulter.
I'm sorry it wasn't Mozart.
No, the Gideon Fulter episode was ridiculous, with him putting a cap on and saying that I can't cross this road. I mean, isn't that just sickening?
Yeah. Before talking about that, I just want to say what we do, which is I joined this group when this was very small, of the Holocaust survivors and their descendants against the genocide in Gaza group, which was started by my good friend Mark Atkind, and only 2 or 3 of them standing there. And I thought that was such a good idea and joined them. And since then, the group has grown, a line of 12 sometimes. And we actually prove and try to undermine as much as we can this claim that these are hate marches, that all Jews support Israel. There we were, in deadly opposition to that claim, that these marches are no-go areas for Jews. There we were, extremely warmly received. I mean, sometimes we have quite moving experiences, the way that people come and thank us, and some people cry. They so appreciate the gesture from the so-called supporting Jews, that the ones that supposedly supporting Israel, that there is this group exact opposite of that, and also that these are no-go areas, completely no-go areas. Now, Gideon Falter was trying to prove that it is a no-go area, and he pretended he was casually wanting to cross right across and in opposite direction to the march, and it was just by the way and a chance that he was there. But in fact, the whole thing was a deliberate provocation, and and he didn't need to go around. But the police suggested that they could take him round in a perfectly safe way, and he wouldn't. You know, he insisted that he wanted to cross against the marching direction and so on. And I think out of that episode of confrontation, the police came out best, and Gideon Falter was unmasked as a provocateur, and I think later everybody accepted that. So anyway, that's what we do, and our group is very much appreciated, I think, by the marchers generally, and we also have the byproduct of attracting a lot of press interest and interviews that come from it. And we're going to continue because it is effective, and we feel it's a duty to do it. I just want to make a few comments about the anti-Semitism definition, the IHRA definition, which had a big role in this weaponization. This was a definition which essentially banned and it's the same caller.
They don't get it, do they?
Can somebody take it away?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Sorry. Why doesn't it say hi? Okay. So, yes, the definition that is now widely used by all the authorities across Europe and elsewhere is trying to make the criticism of Israel equal to anti-Semitism. This is a definition that was not needed at all in the first place. The Oxford English Dictionary has a perfectly simple, good definition of what anti-Semitism is. The only purpose of introducing this complicated definition was to suppress the criticism of Israel. And actually it is so weakly worded and so poor in quality that the Labour Party, when going to court on anti-Semitism issues, doesn't dare to rely on it. In fact, in the last minute they switch charges so as not to have to come out with this definition which doesn't stand up in court. And since then, there has been a much better definition created by mostly international scholars and people called the Jerusalem definition, which of course is ignored by everybody because it doesn't serve the purpose of weaponizing anti-Semitism.
I think Tony would like to speak. Can I actually ask you a question as well, Tony? There were these groups that have charitable status, like Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, actually a charity, but their agenda's quite obvious, isn't it? I mean, can you tell us a bit about them as well?
Well, the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism was formed in the middle of Operation Protective Edge in the summer of 2014. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's basically an Israeli government front organisation. As is UK Lawyers for Israel. They work very closely with the Israeli government and they are attack dogs. But the Charity Commission, I mean, for 6 years it was chaired by William Shawcross, who said one of the major problems facing Europe was Islam. So, I mean, that is the nature of these bodies. I mean, you really wouldn't expect any better. But on the IHRA, I mean, some people may know I was arrested it was October the 4th, the 88th anniversary of the Battle of Cable Street last year, for making a speech outside Zippy Hotoveli's residence in Swiss Cottage, when I quoted a headline. It was in the Jewish Chronicle, which in turn reported on us on a comment I'd made that Israel was Hitler's bastard offspring, which didn't go down too well, I have to say. I say I was arrested, but then I was released without charge, or later I was told there was no charges. And I've done a subject access request to find out what information is given to police officers. And there's this advice sheet, it's 17 pages, 18 pages, and one of them is comparisons between Israel, Zionism and the Nazis. And it basically adopts the IHRA definition. So the police are using it in their operational duties. So I have incorporated that within my complaint because they have no business doing that. They say it offends Jews to make these comparisons. Well, which Jews? Because, of course, anti-Zionist Jews are invisible to the establishment. They have, for them, Jews are only racist Jews or Zionists. And they're the kind of tame colonial pets who provide the moral alibi for everything imperialism is doing and Israel is doing in Gaza, because it is a combined imperialist effort. I mean, it's the United States weaponizing, providing the funds, Britain with the spy planes and so on. So, I mean, that is the role of Jews. It is the kind of provide that moral alibi. But if I can come down to back to just another point, really, which Jackie and others touched on, I think part of the problem for the left has been it's fallen for identity politics. The idea that if you're Jewish, you're an expert and you can define your own oppression. And so when Jews say something, you can't challenge them. Or the same with any group, but that's not true. Oppression is objective. And the fact that you're Jewish, or the fact you're black, or the fact you're any form of oppression doesn't mean you're right. You can be reactionary and gay, you can be reactionary and black. Let's hear what you have to say and see whether it's empirically justified or not. The mere fact that you happen to be a certain identity, I think, is meaningless. The fact I'm Jewish doesn't make me right on something. I mean, I am usually, but but that's coincidental. But that's the point I'm making. It's an abandonment of class politics in a sense, and the left has gone into that swamp, and it's now paying the price because, of course, there are other identity politicians like Nigel Farage who are coming to the fore. So it's the lack of class politics which I think has been responsible for the weakness of the left, and also the Palestinian Solidarity movement, because it hasn't seen these things in terms of imperialism and how it's operated and why Israel is given the license it is. I mean, you go back to what Joe Biden said: if Israel didn't exist, it would have to be invented. And anti-Semitism is there to cover it, really, to provide the alibi and the excuse and the pretext for what they're doing. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that, really. But we are holding a public Zoom meeting on the 9th of May on the IHRA, and there are a number of speakers, including Ilan Pappy, so I hope you will look out for the adverts.
Would you like to add anything, Asa?
On which part?
On the IHRA, the campaign against anti-Semitism, the whole kind of structure around this weaponising him. It's not just that they can call people anti-Semites, but there's the kind of bodies that back them on this as well, aren't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what was said, really. I have a chapter or half a chapter on it in my book about the IHRA. It was really a kind of key moment in the so-called anti-Semitism, so-called crisis in the Labour Party in 2018, when it was the summer of 2018, and that it was really kind of a turning point in the whole Corbyn project, if you will, and it was kind of the last opportunity to salvage it, and it was not salvaged, unfortunately. I mean, it was really kind of, it was, in my view, it was the main thing that brought him down. And the interesting thing about the IHI definition, it wasn't totally new. Like, it was essentially a reworking of a previous pro-Israel definition or misdefinition of anti-Semitism, as Tony has aptly put it. You know, and it was all of these false definitions of anti-Semitism ultimately have their origins with the Israeli government and pro-Israel groups, and this is where they, and even the intelligence services of Israel and the Mossad. So it's that's something actually that Tony Lerman talks about in his book, which is really interesting. Yeah, it was ludicrous, but it was also very effective. You know, it was very effective in kind of dividing that broad left movement, which tried to get Jeremy Corbyn elected Prime Minister, and it was it was really devastating. I've got nothing good to say about it, unfortunately.
Nothing good to say about it. No, well, there isn't much to say good about it. But that's right. The response from the left, people have talked about it already. But I mean, the way that Jeremy Corbyn's mobilised all these people, and it all was killed off by that as one of the reasons. I mean, the false claims of anti-Semitism. I mean, do you think that we've got on top of it now? Do you think we can fight back now? Do you think we're? Huh?
I don't think we've got on top of it at all. I think Tony's point about identity politics and untangling that and getting our heads around what it means to be anti-racist and what the difference is between that and identity politics is absolutely central, and most people don't have that. And most people don't have that because they really don't understand, and I'm talking about on the left, most people don't understand what racism is about. Most people on the left want to be anti-racist because it's not very nice to be racist. That's it, because we should all be nice to each other. It's like that Coca-Cola advert, you know, that's, if only we could hold each other's hands, it would all be so much nicer. And we've forgotten the lessons that were so hard learnt about the fact that racism is essentially about power. That's what it is, or it's about the lack of it. And I don't think the left remembers that. And there is something about, you know, I didn't come up from the left. I came from a different political route and then found myself almost by accident getting involved in the left and then in the Labour Party and then, you know, as vice chair of Momentum. And what's always shocked me was the lack of historical knowledge, for example, about imperialism and colonialism and slavery, and how the actual concept of race was generated to enable imperialism. Because, you know, that's what Israel is. Israel is the last or the most recent settler colonial genocidal project. But it's one of many. It's one of many. And, you know, when we look at America, you know, I recently came back from America. I mean, there you have a country that was actually founded on genocide. So it's not surprising, is it, that they hold out their hands to Israel and they recognize in Israel a sort of kindred spirit, because they're absolutely right to do that. But coming back into the left in the UK, you know, there's a real problem. There's a real problem that the left doesn't recognize how absolutely critical understanding how racism works is, and how it's going to fool us, because, you know, all the time this issue of migration and refugees is coming up, and that is also about race. And if we don't understand it, we are going to be messed up by it yet again. But just one more thing on the IHRA, if I can say so. I remember sitting round at tables on the executive of Momentum. I remember speaking to some very high up people in the Labour Party. I remember all of those conversations about the IHRA and being told, come on, you know, it doesn't matter. Just sign it. Just do it because it won't matter. And I remember saying, but this is absolutely critical. It's going to be really, really important. It will be used against us. And the number of voices that told us it wasn't going to matter. So one thing that the left has got to get is actually get sharp on this. Get political on this. Get on it. And I just think somehow we have got to start upping our game and upping our knowledge and reading some history and looking at what happened with the Black Panthers and looking at what happened in the civil rights movement and in South Africa and looking at what happened with the development of imperialism and actually learning from history. Because what's happening now in Gaza, in Palestine, has happened before. And be absolutely sure, if and when they need to do it to the population here, when the shit hits the fan because of global warming and everything else which is going to happen, they will use the same strategies here. When those billionaires need to repress us, when they need to protect themselves, they'll be just as happy to do it here as they have been to do it in Palestine.
I'd just like to ask. I mean, the thing that I just like to make a point. That the thing that I find so distasteful is when you see them. You know that they're using it as a smear, this anti-Semitism. They know it's not honest, and you see them trying to look honestly into the camera and looking like they're really disgusted about this and all that. I mean, that just makes me think that you can't trust any of them, because there's so many politicians who've done the same thing, acting angry about anti-Semitism when it doesn't really happen to be taking place at all. So look, I think we should do some questions. What do you think? Are you okay? You warm enough?
Yep.
Do you need any more tea?
No, fine.
You all right? Yeah. There's biscuits left. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Do I just do something? All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. My question is how we go about actions. So this encampment, my understanding is to follow the anti-apartheid model of 24-hour vigil until apartheid is ended, and which is a terrific idea. One of the things which I'm involved with, I'm from Southwark, and I'm a member of the NEU, National Education Union. And one of the things we've done is to form what we call the rank and file trade unionists for divestment from Israel, in order to put pressure on the local government pension schemes, which have over £100 billion invested in companies complicit with Israel, including arms companies and Google, etc. So all around the country, people are upping up that action to divest. And the Palestinian Civil Society have asked us to pursue boycott, divestment and sanction, which is one thing we can do. The second thing is to fight the repression, and I've given out some leaflets because we've formed a model trade union resolution which you can put in your trade unions to fight this oppression, which includes the fighting the IHRA. So that can I just say one or two things? I'm Jewish. I was brought up in southeast London. My family went to New Cross Synagogue. They were Zionists. I joined the Zionist youth movement, and then I found out about Palestine and became an anti-Zionist. So, don't give up talking to people. People can be persuaded. Thank you.
Any questions at all? There's one over here.
Great. Oh, hi. Thanks. Oh, is it okay if I'm not recorded? Is that all right? Thank you. Sorry about that. A couple of quick reflections that I just wanted to sort of ask if you could resonate or speak to. So the first one is to talk about national politics that run up to the 2019 election, the IHRA code. I just, that was for me a turning point, and I realised like I'm not in the party that I thought I was in. I look back and I think, gosh, that was such a critical moment to fight for Palestine, but also fight for our own rights. And I just wondered how, if we could go back, what could we have done differently, or what would have helped? I mean, not that I want to sort of blame ourselves, but I'd just be interested to see if there were any reflections, because for me it was a real life-changing moment actually. In so many levels, it sort of turned my worldview around about the country I live in and the system. The second reflection is on that point about climate change. As someone who's worked on food systems and climate change with quite a deep level of expertise, things are just only going to get worse. We're going to have shrinking resources with a growing global population that inevitably will go into geopolitics and increase imperialism, increase colonialism, as far as I can see, because that's the only way that it seems like the logic just goes towards that conclusion. So from the left, we're doing things around Palestine, but it seems like Palestine's connected to a much wider system logic that, as everyone said on the panel, actually implicates all of us, and we're just starting to see the foothills of that in terms of the repression when we fight for Palestinians, but also repression of this population, and I just think it's going to get worse. How can we come together? How can we organise both our intellectual leadership and organise ourselves to come up with a different alternative? So those are my two reflections.
I've got thoughts on the first question, and I'm also going to plug my book because the answer is I have thoughts about it in my book, in the final chapter especially, which you can buy tonight. I've got some copies for sale if anyone's interested in a signed copy afterwards. But to give you the short version, what could have been done differently is give no quarter to it. Like, don't expel anyone, don't suspend anyone, don't say, well, okay, there's some points in it, but it's going over the top. No, like, just completely refuse to accept any of it, because it was never about like the small minority within society that is anti-Semitic. It's not about that. It was purely and simply about trying to destroy the left-wing project and to back up Israel. That's all it was. It was just about Israel. Like, these pro-Israel groups, the Jewish Labour Movement, Labour Friends of Israel, all the other Israel lobby groups within the Labour Party and around the Labour Party, it was just about preserving Israel's right to Holocaust Palestinians in Gaza. That's very purely and simply all it was about. And so there was no way by expelling a few people here and there, suspending Jackie, expelling Tony, Ken Livingstone and everybody else, that they were ever going to give any quarter, because they didn't. They just ramped it up and up. So I think essentially you just have to give no quarter, because the pro-Israel lobby never takes yes for an answer. Once you say yes to them, they just demand more. So that's what should have been done differently, is just completely refuse to accept it. Because, I mean, like, that is the answer, because the opposite of that was what was tried, and it was a complete disaster. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I haven't got much more to say about that, really. You know, I remember pleading with people and saying, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, they come for me, they come for Tony, they go. What they want is everybody who disagrees. They want to smash this movement. They will smash this movement. And I love that thing, you know, they won't take yes for an answer. You know, if we ever had the opportunity again, or if you're in any other movement, let's stop all this nonsense about, well, there's another side to this. No, there is no other side to it. That's why I'm expressing that level of intolerance when people say, oh yes, but she was very upset when you said that. Hard luck. Hard luck. You know, maybe they should be upset, and in fact they should be upset. So I just think we weren't firm enough like that. There was something about people in the movement who thought somehow, I mean, I did say about Jeremy Corbyn, who, you know, I've got all sorts of nice things to say about him, but, you know, he was the closest thing to a vicar that I've ever seen as an MP. And that is wonderful in some ways, but what we needed was somebody who was going to stand up against it, not somebody who was going to actually consider and think that we were going to be able to talk to these people. You cannot talk to them in that way.
We needed a Lenin instead of a Tolstoy.
Say it.
We needed a Lenin instead of a Tolstoy.
Tony.
Yeah, there are a number of things. I mean, the firstly, I think what happened proved that the Labour left was totally incapable of fighting for its own corner when it got control of the Labour Party. What they did was appease the right, and I've always said that if you're faced by a dangerous animal, you can't play with it, and that's what they did. And actually, John McDonnell was worse than Corbyn, and McDonnell I wouldn't accuse of being a vicar. But I also have to say our own Palestine Solidarity movement. I wrote an open letter to Ben Sofa in 2016. He's the secretary of Palestine Solidarity campaign, saying you've got to do something about these anti-Semitism attacks. And he just wrote back to me and said, no, we don't play according to their game. And PSC did absolutely nothing to rebut the false anti-Semitism attacks. It did virtually nothing about the IHRA either. And I think one of the conclusions we have to draw is that you can't simply say, oh, well, we don't take a position on one state or two states. We have to say two states means an Israeli state, an Israeli apartheid state, and now a genocidal state. We are in favour of one state, and we are anti-Zionist. And therefore we won't have any quarter with those who are racists. Bearing in mind, I mean, we also have to consider that Israel is not South Africa. South Africa had a lot of things going for it. It had, for a start, a minority of whites. It had a very strong black working class. It had a white regime which didn't want to exclude because it was dependent on their labour. The Palestinians are in a very difficult and different situation. There's parity with the settlers. They have Arab regimes which are collaborative, which Quisling regimes in essence, which are American client regimes, whereas you had the overthrow of Portuguese colonialism in the countries surrounding South Africa, Mozambique and Angola. So they were very different regimes. So without an uprising in the Arab East, I can't see the Palestinians winning because they're simply not strong enough. But our duty, obviously, is to build a solidarity movement. And we have to be quite clear. Israel has to go. It's a failed state. It's a state which can't live with its own indigenous people. And once you accept that, then you make you progress politically, and of course they're going to call you anti-Semitic. So you have to wear that. I mean, because what they're saying in essence is, if you oppose genocide, you're anti-Semitic. Yeah. So some people will actually turn around and say, well, if the choice is between supporting the Palestinians and being anti-Semitic, then or being opposed to anti-Semitism, I'll be anti-Semitic, because Zionism actually increases anti-Semitism by associating Jews with what they do. That's the irony of all these accusations. It doesn't diminish, it actually increases anti-Semitism. But we have to, if you like, draw certain conclusions from the episode. And I think one conclusion is we need to build a new left party. The Labour Party is completely unfit for the task. And today, really, you can't put a piece of paper between Starmer and the leader of the Tory party, Kemi Badenoch.
Except one has got balls.
One has got balls, but I don't know which one.
Right, so we got another question coming, and one of them.
Hello, I'd like to bring the question back to the IHRA definition, and I'd like the panellists to speak on the case of Professor David Miller. If you could tell us about what you think the repercussions of this case are for the rest of us as activists. As this definition is being brought into more and more organisations, the chances are increasing for us to face the same kind of repression. And I want you to talk about the implications of this case.
I think that's you, Tony, isn't it? You should answer.
I'm not knowledgeable enough.
Tony?
I'm quite happy to.
Yeah, I think you're the one who was
Well, David Miller faced a very sustained attack at Bristol University because of some of the things he said and did, and he was a target. He wasn't, of course, the only target. There were other academics, Shad Abu Salama and so on, but he was targeted at Bristol with false accusations of anti-Semitism, and despite 2 QCs clearing him, the university was subject to such massive political pressure that they buckled. He wasn't actually the first person. Rebecca, what's her name? I can't remember now. Rebecca something. No. It was there was a Jewish academic who preceded him, who wrote an article for Counterpunch on anti-Semitism and the campaign against anti-Semitism. Rebecca Gould, that's right. They went for her, but they failed in that task because it was so obviously an attack on free speech. But David Miller was attacked and he was sacked, and he went to a tribunal which did find that anti-Zionism is a protected characteristic in terms of the Equalities Act, that it's discrimination on the grounds of a philosophical belief. But I also have to say, regarding David Miller, I have written articles, one which appeared on my blog and Jewish Voice for Labour, that some of the things that David Miller is saying today, and some of his tweets and so on, in which he's singling out Jewish anti-Zionists and saying, well, there aren't really such people, or very few of them, and there are no Israeli anti-Zionists, I think is incredibly self-destructive. And unfortunately, he needs taking aside and being told quite clearly that he's damaging his own case. So he is, in some ways, his own worst enemy. And I think part of the problem is his lack of class politics. So he actually has illusions, in particular in the Iranian regime, which I don't want to go into, but my view on Iran and any other similar state is, when imperialism attacks it, you defend the regime. But when the regime attacks its own people, whether it's the Kurds or women or gays or workers, you defend the people who are being attacked. And David doesn't realise that. But unfortunately, I say, David is making some very unhelpful comments And as I say, he is arousing a lot of antagonism. When he says, for instance, there's no Israeli anti-Zionists, well, I mean, I have two friends, Ronnie Bark and Stavit Saini, who are both Israeli anti-Zionists and are facing quite long jail sentences for their activity in Palestine Action. Are they not anti-Zionists? I really do think he needs to sometimes think before he actually puts his thoughts down on Twitter, or better still, not use Twitter.
Yes. Hello. What kind of amazes me is in this whole debate is that this adage that kind of every accusation is a confession hasn't been kind of accepted or thought about more, because it's absolutely true, in the sense that Israel accusing the rest of the world or whoever of anti-Semitism while they themselves are committing a major anti-Semitic act because, as we all know, Arabs are Semites, and I don't know why people don't make more fuss about it. Yes, so all the different groups that the Arabic-speaking people of the Levant, are Semites, as are the Jews and the various groups. And so it kind of, there is the case that, from the start, the Zionists were kind of had a strong element of anti-Semitism in their beliefs. And that's why they actually, when they met up with and negotiated with the SS officials, they actually shared certain values. And they are, Tony Greenstein quotes some of the people, in his book about, their ideas about looking down upon, the Jews who are from the shtetls, who aren't kind of sophisticated as maybe Herzl himself was, because he was German speaking from a middle class family, etc. He as a founder, he actually looked down upon the majority of poor Jews and thought that they were even degenerate because of inbreeding. He actually uses those kind of words. So it's quite astounding that isn't kind of brought up, in the sense that, and the sort of self-disdain, and kind of that they couldn't accept the Yiddish language, for example, that they had to invent Hebraic, ironically using some of the Arabic roots in the language, and how they also kind of changed their names. Now each one of the ministers of the thing has a different name, and they changed it to kind of be. So everything is fake, really, about the Zionist project. It's all fake. Sorry.
Can I mean, there's a lot in what you've asked. Can I first deal with the Semites thing?
Yes.
There are no such thing as Semites. Semitic was a linguistic distinction, language. And Wilhelm Marr, who was an anti-Semite, in fact, he coined the term anti-Semite in 1879. He founded the League of Anti-Semites. He operated on the belief that Jews were not indigenous to Europe. They were. He called them Semites. Or he was wrong. He saw Jews who never came from the Middle East. He saw them as aliens, strangers who should go back to where they came from. I mean, that was the origin of it. But I don't think it's worthwhile saying that Jews are Semites, because they're not. They're European settlers, white European settlers who happen to be of the Jewish faith, nothing more. And then the Zionism was founded on the basis of something called the negation of the diaspora. In other words, it blamed the Jews in the diaspora for anti-Semitism, because they literally, in the metaphor used by A.B. Yehoshua, there were guests staying in someone else, using other people's countries like hotels. They'd outstayed their welcome. And so they developed, because they weren't on national land, Blut and Bloden, the kind of German racial Nazi concept, blood and soil. Because they hadn't been attached to the land, they developed all these asocial qualities. So if you didn't know as an anti-Semite or a Zionist speaking, you wouldn't know who it was, because what they said about Jews was often worse than what the anti-Semites said. I mean, Pinchas Rosenblatt, the first Israeli justice minister, called Palestine an institute for the fumigation of Jewish vermin, for example. And there are many other quotes which are in my book. I don't have time to go through them now, but what the Zionists said about the Jews in the diaspora was worse than what the anti-Semites said, because they'd brought it on themselves. In the words of Chaim Weizmann, the first president of Israel and a long-time president of the Zionist organization, they were economic and moral dust. I mean, he had absolute contempt. They wanted to create a new Jew, and they were quite clear, actually. We're now told that Israel is a refuge for Jews if there's anti-Semitism. But at the time, they were quite clear. They were opposed to refugeeism, that is, saving people who are refugees, because they'd be saving the wrong type of Jew. They wanted pioneers, chalutzim, young, strong and healthy. They didn't want the disabled, they didn't want the refugees, they didn't want the detritus of the ghetto. And that was Zionism's attitude. It was the same kind of racial supremacy that operated elsewhere in Europe as well, which is why today, I mean, you know, the best friends, I mean, Tommy Robinson, Richard Spencer, Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, you name it, they all love Israel because it's the kind of ideal ethno-nationalist state. And so all this nonsense about anti-Semitism should be treated for what it is, total and utter hypocrisy.
Now, look, we've got one more, we're going to have one more question and then we'll conclude.
Hello, I've just been given the microphone by this kind gentleman. Oh, it's now off. It's now off. Is it on or is it off?
Oh, yeah.
Apparently it is on, I'm just not. Hello. My question, I just want to say thank you everyone for all your thoughts tonight. It's been absolutely wonderful, and each of your perspectives has been definitely really helpful and enlightening. My question comes from as someone who, when the McCarthyism of the Labour Party was happening, was reading the headlines about it and was unfortunately believing what they said about it at the time. As I was wondering, although I take Jackie's point in the sense of we should educate ourselves and people should understand what structural racism, what racism actually is in terms of its power dynamic, and also people should educate themselves. But my question is, and I take your point that Keir Starmer, you don't have too much respect for him. But given the fact that, and all of you, but given the fact that at the moment we have Keir Starmer and we have a Labour Party in power right now, who have a certain political bend, shall we say, given that that is the case, and it doesn't look like there's going to be a revolution tomorrow, although if there is, sign me up. What would you say to people in the Labour Party right now who are doing and making policies to try and bend the people running the Labour parties and try to change the direction that they are facing? Is it the fact that we have to just tell them, I mean, I appreciate we should always just say, like, no, you know, and be firm about that. But is there anything that you would recommend to say to those kind of people to affect policy change or the direction of travel? Because I think that that's something that would be helpful considering. Thank you.
I'm going to respond to that. I'm sure other people will respond however they want to respond. But not my whole aim, I've got other aims politically. Let me be frank, I want to see the Labour Party totally smashed. Yes. That's what I want. I want to see by almost any means possible, the Labour Party smashed. Because until they are removed, there is no hope for a proper radical party. However that's done, whether it's because, you know, another group comes along or they get smashed in the next election. Because if one thing was proven by what happened with Corbyn, was that the Labour Party as it is, as it's structured, as it is supported in terms of the trades union movement, is not and can never be a force for radical change. In fact, it's a barrier to change, and the Labour Party will do anything, and that's including lying, deep levels of fraud, victimisation, and actually exposing their members to all sorts of awfulness. They will do anything to prevent the left getting back. If you remember, the fable was, you know, we'll take turns. You get in, and then you'll have a leader, and then we'll have a conference, and then you'll... No. They've proven that that will never happen. It is time to actually wake up to that and understand the Labour Party is not that vehicle. I always think our politics is about 20 years behind what's happening in the States in many ways, 10, 20 years. And what we're having is a closer and closer confluence between the Labour Party and the Tory party. Now, I know what some people are going to say to me. They're going to say, yeah, but Jackie, if we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to get reform. We're going to get reform coming in. But what you've got to understand is, why are people voting reform? They are voting reform because of the fact that Labour is offering them not nothing, but worse than nothing. And so until we smash Labour, we cannot do anything. I want to see them totally, utterly destroyed. And I'm really hoping for that this May.
Well, we've got one more question apparently. Would someone like to? Yep.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you for that, actually. I've been saying that the Labour Party is no longer a vehicle for change or social equity or anything good, really. I wanted to refer to something that Asa said earlier about, you know, something along the lines that you cannot blame Palestinians for blaming the Jews for what is happening to them. I just wanted to say that actually we don't. We do express and have many, you know, expressions about how the Jews did this to us and how the Jews did that to us. But the moment you probe any one of us, then we make the distinction between Jews and Zionists. So it's you know, when we say Jews, we actually mean the Zionists. And I know this in my heart. My family are very conservative Muslims, and they understand it perfectly, and everybody I know understands it in the same way. I wanted to just explore your thoughts more about Israel's exceptionalism. Why on earth Israel is so exceptional? It's an exception every time. It doesn't matter when, it doesn't matter what they do. It always gets justified. Is there anything beyond them being what I called a contracted mercenary in the Middle East?
Not much.
So, yeah, your thoughts around that?
I don't know what comment of mine you're referring to, because I didn't say that.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't really have anything more to say about that. I think you've misinterpreted me.
Yeah, I mean, I perfectly understand if a Palestinian in the West Bank has the Israeli soldiers coming to them, or the settlers coming, and they call themselves Jews, then they will respond and call them Jews. just like people called the Germans Nazis for the same reason. I don't think it's racist in the slightest, so obviously not. I don't think people should get too precious about that kind of thing. What was your other question? I can't remember now. Yeah, Israel being exceptional. That's right. Yes. No, I don't. I don't think it is. I think Israel is doing very much what, in particular, the United States wants it to do. Unfortunately, I mean, Israel is seen as, if you like, the guarantor of the regimes, the Arab regimes which preside over the oil. I mean, that's imperialism's main objective. And the same with Germany, for example. I mean, people think, oh, well, Germany is supporting Israel because of guilt over the Holocaust, but that's not true. There actually isn't a genocide that the German state hasn't smiled upon. I mean, when researching an article, I found there was another genocide in East Africa, the Mashi rebellion, around the same time as the Nama Herero genocide as well in Namibia. So in Germany has been involved in that, the Armenian, and then of course its own Holocaust. So of course the German state, which says Israel is its reason for being, they will also smile upon what's happening in Gaza. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But Israel isn't exceptional. If you like, it's the operative arm of imperialism in the Middle East. And it's there to guarantee the stability of the Saudi and the other regimes. And its antagonism to Iran, of course, is not because Iran is a threat to it. It's because Israel wants to be the hegemon. I mean, that's why it's starting to come into conflict with Turkey over Syria, because Israel is busily destabilising Syria. I mean, no one's complained that Israel's gone and bombed Syria the moment Assad fell. I mean, just imagine if Russia had done the same in some European country. I mean, just imagine Russia had executed 15 Red Cross workers. I mean, we never hear the end of it. You wouldn't have the BBC having a headline, a mistake was made. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, how can you possibly call that a mistake given the lies that they told? But I don't think it's exceptional. It just says a lot about our ruling class, I'm afraid, that they actually say absolutely nothing. So when they speak about hostages, they never refer to Palestinian hostages, of course. They're purely white and Israeli.
Do you want to speak, Stephen?
Yeah, I just want to add that the impunity is very close to the exceptionalism, and I think that does relate to some extent to the hijacking of the Holocaust experience, that because of the undoubtedly enormous suffering of the Jewish people in the Second World War, that is being used as an excuse for whatever Israel then can do in turn. And this impunity that they feel that they had acquired, obviously it's false, but they nonetheless act as if it existed. They then turn around and use this impunity on anybody else, like the Palestinians who never had anything to do with the original Holocaust.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it does is this sense of exceptionalism is encouraged. It is a fantasy, but it's encouraged, and it harks back to the way that the Holocaust and this sort of narrative that has been constructed about the Jews being the only people who have suffered 3,000 or 2,000 or however many years of victimization in the whole world, and that the Jewish Holocaust is the worst Holocaust that's ever happened, and it's an exceptional event. All of that is part of a construction that gives a certain sort of authenticity, a sort of excuse for Israel to claim that it must do this because it is the last outpost for Jews, and of course that it's the only thing that protects Europe from the Muslim hordes. I mean, that's the other thing, isn't it? We're doing your job. Just remember that. I mean, it's absolute nonsense, but it goes down very well on the media. And then it's backed up, you know, by all sorts of cultural artifacts that we are exposed to as well. So, you know, it's nonsense, isn't it?
Right, well, I think we're going to wrap up the discussion here. I just like to thank everyone at the camp for facilitating this, and for all our guests for turning up. Here we've got Asa. He's got a copy of his book there. You can get it online because we're online as well. Asa, show it to the camera. You can get it on. And we've got some on sale. And Tony as well. Tony's got a book. Have you got a book, Jackie? Sorry.
I ain't got no books.
No, another book, right? Have you got a book?
It's in the making.
It's in the making. Right. Right. So you've got some pre-orders here. You've got some pre-orders there. So we're going to end the live stream. I've been told to say subscribe, and what's the other thing? Like. Yeah, like. Share. Yeah, share. And what?
Support the camp.
Yeah, we'll support the camp, of course. Yeah. Which is now in a dark. Look, do you want to show the view of the river? Go on, look, he's got a good camera here. You might be able to see some of it here. Look. It's beautiful. And the embassy's behind there. You can't see the sort of.
Yeah, horrible.
You can see there's the embassy up there.
The empire.
Boo!
The evil empire.
Yeah.
The dark star.
And I won't say that.
The dark star.
There's some food for the panellists. So all right, well, good night, and apparently there's some food for the panellists, and that's all we need to know. Thank you.
Free Palestine.